days. And there will be room for questions at the end. So I'm going to start with a controversial opinion. So there's talk about vibe coding and there's talk about AI-assisted development. So the approach we kind of have is that you can't just vibe your way into a fully functional production-grade product. Like, it works great for small use cases, but then as soon as you get a complex project, it kind of breaks down. But if you find some ways to optimize the flow, you can make it work really well for you and make you work faster as a team and produce more consistent code, basically utilizing AI as a companion rather than like having it in the driver's seat. Because studies show like mixed results here. Some think that you get faster output, but others think like you get messier code and, unless you have a structured approach to it. So there are some challenges. So when using AI in developing, you can get like inconsistent code. Everyone has their own preference, but usually this doesn't work in a product with multiple engineers, especially as the team scales. You have the communication overhead, right? So you have to think on how to build things. But if you can kind of encode this into your standards, then you win a lot. So also, AI usually lacks project-specific understanding. It doesn't know what you're building unless you're telling it, and especially as the project is large, it's hard for it to fill out the context window with relevant content. And as I said, like, you have engineers use AI in different ways. Like, there's no shared standard usually, but so you just need to find a way to make it concise in order to improve the productivity in the team. So making AI a first-class citizen can make you produce code faster and more reliably when you combine it with some strong standards, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. So we work at Sana. We work with a few core or key principles. So basically, we codify everything. Like, we make the implicit knowledge in the teams explicit. And how we do this? Yes, how we do this, I'll talk a bit more about. But basically, you can encode it in files. So that's a quite common approach. Giving AI the right context at the right time, pointing it into the right direction. And usually we think about AI in a way that we don't have it build the feature. Usually we have the engineers set the architecture and have AI work on very specific problems and small sub-problems. Usually we find that works better than trying to tell it to, hey, just build this new feature, and it just goes all over the place. But if you tell it like, okay, do this specific thing with the relevant context, it usually works quite well. So we call it AI-assisted development. Really, we don't vibe internally at Sana, and that's not like our philosophy on that. I'll say that it's very, at Sana at least, it's very free what you want to use. Like, we don't even force people to use AI as they work on features. Like, whatever works for you. We encourage people to use it and like explore how it can augment their work. So we have people using Cursor, we have people using Copilot, like Cloud Code, Codex, whatever you want to use. Like, that's encouraged and that's fine. Sana is like they'll cover the expenses for you. But we do have foundations of a Claude MD file. Like, the most popular right now at Sana is using Claude Code, especially with VS Code or Cursor. So we have a Claude file, and we also have Cursor rules. We have a lot of guidance into this Claude file. We've adopted a few functional programming principles, and I'll talk about why we empirically think that this has worked best for us. This file, it's version controlled, it lives in the repo, and it's actually owned by the technical leaders of the team, because whatever you do in these files, it kind of spreads out to all the engineers in the team. So you want to make sure that not everyone can just change it as they want, but you need to have consensus in the leadership. So this is like an excerpt of our Cloud MD file. Usually we put like the most important stuff or like important stuff at the beginning and at the end. Usually that's a guidance that LLMs, they tend to remember the things that you have at the beginning and at the end. But we also tell the LLMs like kind of like what the project structure is and how it works and what they do. So for example, you can see like libraries is in a specific folder, indexing code is in a specific folder, etc., etc. And in these, and I'll talk a bit about this, but in these we have then more documentation that tells you like in this folder, this library does this thing, and this is how you run the tests in it, etc. So it can kind of like do a search and go through everything here. So for example here, when the LLM needs help, we tell it like, hey, we have like specific rules as well for example, cursor rules. So we can use these. We have rules, for example, for how to write React components, how to use, how to validate data using like SOD or whatever, logging, etc. So like, if it's unsure about something, it can look into this other rules directory where, which is also like version controlled. And then we just want to make sure that it's always like writing readable, pragmatic code. Like usually this works, and as LLMs are getting better, they are better at instruction following. But it's just good to emphasize these things for it. So as an example, we always in our rules, we've learned that it's good to not be vague. So basically, don't say like write good code. Like, what's good code? It doesn't know. Like, the training data might contain massive amounts of different types of code. So we usually just always put examples like, hey, this is how we want to do things. So like, if you want to do something using like dependency injection, like this is how you build a service for that. So you really need to point the LLM into the right path. Because the alternative here is that it's like, okay, I want to build a service, like then it does a search in the code base, like how do I build a service? It might find some old examples, for example, that you don't really want it to follow. But if you tell it like, hey, this is how you should do it, you can usually steer it in the right way. We've also seen, and I'm curious to hear what other people are thinking here, like this is just empirically, that it has an easier time to understand and write like functional code. And we think this might be because with mutations and side effects, it's not as co-located and composable as functional code. So basically, you could have a state variable that's like far up in a file or somewhere else, like even like if you have a global state. But it seems to excel at composable co-located code, like in the functional programming case. It's also usually what we think or what we've seen is that it's a predictable pattern for the LLM. And the data flow is quite clear, as the input is always like the output. The output is always the input to the next step, and it doesn't generally need as much context to help you in your development. And this is just an example to show this. Like here, for example, if it looks at this line here, it needs to remember that the score here was 0. So it needs to remember every previous change, and like each mutation in the code adds some noise to the LLM. And here you have an example where each step is independent, no memory is required. It's just pattern matching, really. This is also like results are outside the function. It can't really see this dependency without reading the full body. And like it's also hard for humans to, it can be easy for humans to miss this as well. Yes, so that's what I was talking about. So also as part of our development process, we do use like MCP servers. So these are, I got a question of like, how do you make sure that these don't like send your data or IP to all kinds of things? We usually treat MCP servers in the project quite sensitively, I'd say, in a sense. So they require, you can't just add any MCP server to the repo. They are like vetted and security reviewed. We always opt for official ones, for example, the linear official one or Notion official ones, the Sentry. And we also use our own, actually. So if you use Sana AI or Sana agents, you might know that we, for example, can index Google Drive documents, etc., so which contains like tech docs, product specifications, meeting notes, etc. So as a developer, you can ask, like, we talked about this bug at stand-up, like, can you help me find the issue for it or fix it? Or I'm building this feature, like, help me achieve this specific outcome. So it can really augment and power our workflow, especially by using our own product. So it's kind of like dog food in here. Something we've built actually is an in-house AI reviewer. So we had the issue that people were really tired of waiting for reviews, especially as people work flexible hours. So we built our own SOC 2 approved AI reviewer. And this is a way, I'll talk a bit about what it can review and what it can't review. But this is really a way to using AI to optimize like throughput in the team. So you can see an example here. It reviewed a low-risk PR. It's kind of like CodeRabbit and everything, but we don't really trust giving CodeRabbit right access to our repositories. And also, we have really strict SOC 2 requirements and policies, etc. We really want to be able to configure it. Like, you can review these files. These are okay for you to review. These are not okay for you to review. This is what you should look for, etc. And so, for example, in this case here, it approved this pull request. And here you can see like the rules. So it can only like approve low-risk pull requests, and I'll show you a bit about what that means. And then it has specific rules. So it looks like at security. So we have documentation or markdown files in repositories that say like during a security review you should look for this. There should be no like hard-coded secrets. You should not be doing this or that. We have logging rules. You should not use console log, for example, in the client because you might leak user data or whatever. This is how you do React components. This is how you use SOD. And we also have rules like if these files change, the reviewer looks that the infra team, for example, has reviewed or looked at the pull request. So it's not like a Wild West here where it can just approve anything. It can also generate like pull request descriptions from the diffs if engineers want it. One issue we saw is that a lot of people don't write pull request descriptions, and we thought it's better if it's AI generated from diff rather than having nothing. Especially as Cloud Code, etc., can really like look at the Git log and look at the diffs, and then it can find the pull requests and or commits and kind of do like a bisect on that. And we also, into this reviewer, we feed the Claude and the Claude files and Cursor rules, so it knows the code standards that it should follow in the project. For example, here you can see it does not, for example, approve anyone changing the review rules or like messing with the database functions, etc. So. And I think to date it's reviewed more than 8,500 pull requests. So that's a lot of time saved from engineers having to do it. For example, here you can see like some core review principles: be practical but still maintain high standards, be thorough but not pedantic, look for these things. And for example, here's a bit of the security review. No hard-coded secrets, API keys, sensitive information. Make sure that the input is sanitized, validated. And we have a lot of rules, like it can't, for example, approve database migrations, but it can give recommendations to it, like, hey, you should be thinking about this and that. And the same goes for like workflows, Kubernetes changes, React, security, Terraform, like everything like this. So what we've seen is that what works for us is having a single source of truth, which is usually then our Claude file. Always making sure to codify the rules and the guidelines that you have for a project. So be explicit about the rules and the context for your project. Also layer documentation. So what I talked about before was that we have this Claude MD files, but it says like, hey, so these are the libraries, and in the libraries you have specific documentation for those files. So it kind of can go deeper and deeper into what it needs to find. Because otherwise you have a huge project where it kind of needs to do a search throughout everything, and that might or might not work well, but usually it's smart enough to say, okay, these changes or files I'm looking for are in this directory because it said so in the documentation. And I talked about the critical rules at the top and the bottom, and that has worked well for us. And also something we did at Sana, and I encourage others to try, is we had an AI week where we basically let everyone find ways you can augment your workflow or improve your workflow using AI. So free for all, experiment, see what you can do with whatever tools you want. So some don'ts: too much documentation, and especially conflicted documentation. Vague rules, so be opinionated. Don't say write good code. What's good code? What do you really want it to do? Concrete examples are usually working really well. And we also have it generate JS docs when it writes functions, because docs can usually convey the intent to LLMs in later stages when it wants to do something. But we also tell it to update the feature docs for libraries when it's adding things or changing things. Thank you.